We want to welcome you into episode number 4 of the Main Rundown podcast. As always, I'm Zach Tarenko alongside my co-host, Jeff Christianberry. Jeff, how are we feeling today?
Feeling pretty good. We had the snow here over the weekend, lost power for about 16 to 18 hours. Brutal, but, starting to melt already. But that spring surprise right before the spring sports season. It hadn't snowed all summer. And then, of course, 2 days before the spring sports season, we get, dumped on some snow and some ice and some power outages. So could be worse. And we can't complain over the course of the winter that we had, but still just bad timing for Mother Nature.
Yeah, same. It didn't snow, but it rained and it poured here in Connecticut. It was not fun on Saturday, but got to get through those late storms, and that means the sun is coming. The sun is hopefully coming. Before we get into any big topics for this episode, I got to ask you, men's tournament, we're at the Sweet 16 now. Tell me a little bit about, did you end up making a bracket, and how does that bracket looking right now?
Yeah, I made a bracket, but, not so great. I lost Kansas. I had them in the Final Four.
Wow.
Again, I didn't watch a whole lot of college basketball this year. I did, unaware that they're one of the best players or the best player was out for the tournament. I thought they played well against Gonzaga for a half, and then Gonzaga just laid the hammer down. And if Gonzaga plays like that, they're going to go to the Final Four. I mean, they shot like 65% from the floor, tons great from three. I'd say overall it's been a fine tournament. Again, not a whole lot of major upsets. And certainly look at the Sweet 16. You have NC State in there. So a couple of the lower seed teams, but nobody that's really like a Cinderella, I would say, which could make for some good basketball. My Duke Blue Devils looked incredible in that second game.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
I was surprised how well they played, even though we're playing kind of an inferior opponent in James Madison. And it stinks because Houston was to the wire against Texas A&M. And of course, Duke plays the winner of that game. So I would have much rather him play the Aggies. I think my big takeaway from the tournament so far is I really am starting to dislike Dan Hurley. His antics. I mean, again, this is not news to people who really follow college basketball, but like there's an age-old thing where, coaches will create, conflict where there isn't one, right? Belichick did this all the time, and we loved him for it. Hurley takes it to a whole new level. Like we had the University of Georgia and other schools say, like, nobody believed in us. It's like, you were preseason number one. Like everyone believed in you. Like UConn, everybody's picked UConn to win the championship, almost everybody. And then he goes on these weird rants. He was up 52-17, and after the first half against Stetson was like absolutely upset at his team for playing the way they did, even though they're up by 35. He went on this weird rant about how the tournament is the selection committee is out to get them, even though they played Stetson and Northwestern, and they play like in Boston and like Providence. Like those are the two places they're playing, which are right close to UConn. So it's just like he's taking it to a whole new level, and he makes it miserable. Like it must be miserable to play for him when he's constantly just like negative. Like, oh, I don't know, we're only the one seed that everyone thinks is going to win. Tough on us. So that's my big takeaway. Is I really don't want UConn to win now. Before I didn't really care. I picked UNC to win mostly because I hate UNC, even though they look pretty good still. As far as my Final Four, I have Marquette in the championship game. Again, my bracket doesn't really matter. I'm not going to win any contests at this point, so whatever. It's been fairly exciting. There haven't been really any buzzer beaters. There've been some overtime games, but the overtimes haven't been too dramatic. So I would give this tournament a B so far. I am really upset. My one really bad take of the tournament, a really upset take, is the Sweet 16 games this week. And maybe they've done this in the past. I don't remember. On Thursday, the games are at 7 or like at 6, like 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and then like 9:45 and 10:15. 10:15 on a Thursday night is ridiculous. And that game's in Boston. Imagine if tickets to that game. Like if I had here, I wouldn't get home till 2:33 in the morning for a basketball game. And they're doing it for the West Coast people, which is crazy. There's so many more viewers in the Central and Eastern time zones. It's kind of silly. So like, I just not going to watch that game. Like if Duke was playing, yeah, sure. I'm not staying up till past midnight to watch a Sweet 16 basketball game. And that's because I'm being an old curmudgeon, but like, I just don't understand, besides money, that they're making on a weeknight for you to have to stay up till past midnight to watch a game. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's it's an interesting time. So a lot of people around me, even I'm a little bit confused too. A lot of people were frustrated that this big break. I know that they have to do the break between round of 32 and Sweet 16 and to give them some time, but you go like 4 days without the basketball, and it kind of it turns it off to then turn it back on. But my brackets were going really well through the first day. My whole plan, I think I explained this to you in the last episode, was to kind of account for all the possibilities. But realistically, you would need hundreds of brackets to
Hmm.
have account for every single possibility. And after like I think 9 games or like one of the last games, all my brackets had I think I don't even know who it was. It was one of the last teams, and that team lost. And there there went my brackets, and there went my interest in watching any college basketball for the rest of the year on the men's side. Um, but you made a great point. I really don't think there's been a lot of upsets. For some reason, a lot of my brackets, I had more upsets that didn't happen. You know, you look at NC State, Oakland, Oregon, but only one round. I mean,
Yeah,
Oakland,
Grand
obviously.
Canyon won,
Yeah,
won, and then they lost. Oakland, you like I said, won and then they lost. So a lot of all these teams that kind of
yeah,
Yale, they won one and then lost. So it's hard because you get these you get these Cinderella teams in the Sweet 16. You don't necessarily get great games there. So
yeah.
I'm fine with it. It means you're gonna have some of the best teams. You know, none of the one seeds have lost or anything. So could make for a really exciting Sweet 16 and beyond. But yeah, it's been a fine tournament. I'll have it on this weekend, but
Hmm.
we'll see. I'll certainly watch Duke. Hopefully they can take care of business, but they got a big matchup against Houston. So
Yeah, your guy Jared McCann's been playing well.
yeah, very
Yeah,
well. They play. I mean,
it's
they play like that. They have a chance to beat anybody if they play like that. That's the Duke team that was ranked number 2 or 3 overall to begin the season.
mhm.
They just haven't played that well until now. So hopefully, they're peaking at the right time. Get ready for
Well,
Cooper Flag next year, right? That's what it's all about.
we'll
Yeah.
have to see how they do over the weekend, and then we'll probably end up talking about it in next week's episode as well.
Yeah.
But right now, let's head into the rundown segment, and I guess I'll start off this week. Jeff, you started off last week, so my first topic of the week is about the U.S. men's national soccer team. They three-peated the CONCACAF, which that's how you're supposed to pronounce it.
CONCACAF. Yep.
Okay. Every time I say it in my head, I'm like, well, that does not sound right, but it is. They repeated the CONCACAF Nations League. It's basically just like all the teams in North and South America, most of them, I believe.
Central America, North and Central America. Yeah.
Play, and the U.S. with a great game, beating Mexico 2-0, and the game before had come back to beat Jamaica 3-1. Just a pretty solid tournament, good showing. I mean, at this point, it's basically like international friendlies. It's getting warmed up for the World Cup and the big competitions coming up in the next couple of years. In the championship against Mexico, Tyler Adams with the incredible 30, 35 yards out, top corner snipe. Just really great to see that from him. But what I want to talk about is this U.S. team. You know, in the last World Cup, the group stage was, I would say, it went how most people thought it was going to go. They make it to the round of 16.
16.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I'm blanking. They played the Netherlands. Tough game. They're a young team. And everybody after that tournament said, well, when 4 years comes around, they're going to be older, they're going to be more experienced, and we're really, really starting to see it. They have a lot of threats on this team, and that's my big point here. You know, this team has the most Premier League and Serie A players for the United States national team at one time. So we've got 5 in Serie A and 5 in the Premier League. That's the most that the United States have ever had of players representing that nation. And I just run through this lineup really quick. I want to run through. You've got Christian Pulisic, who's at AC Milan, Timothy Weah at Juventus, Balogun, who's at I think I wrote this in as AC Milan, but he's at
Yeah. Where
oh
is
my
he?
gosh. Oh my God. I can't believe I wrote it wrong. He is at AS Monaco. That's where it
Right.
is. He's at
Yeah.
AS Monaco. And then Haji Wright, who is at Coventry City. And he actually had the game winning goal when they upset Wolves in the FA Cup. And then Ricardo Pepi at PSV, an underrated player. In the midfield, Brendan Aronson, Gio Reyna, Yunus Musu's also at AC Milan, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams. And on defense, Anthony Robinson is a great fullback at Fulham, Tim Ream as well, Sergino Dest and Chris Richards with Crystal Palace, and Matt Turner, obviously. He's on the older side, but been playing well with Nottingham Forest this year. But this is a solid roster. And I feel like in the past, the United States has never really had a full lineup, starting 11 and guys on the bench, where we can say, oh, these guys are Premier League, Serie A level players, your top league level players who are scoring goals for their teams and playing really well. And right now, before the CONCACAF Nations League, they were sitting at 12th in the FIFA rankings, which is the best they've been in a long time. So I guess my question for you is, and my point as well is, you know, is this team one of the best that we've seen in decades? And do you think this might be this 2026 World Cup? Do you think that this World Cup might be the best chance the United States has at making a run? because in my eyes, that's what I see. And I see, because after that, as you start to move ahead, these guys are going to get on the older side, and you're going to have to wait and see who these younger players are. But what are your thoughts on 2026 and where the U.S. might stand in the World Cup?
I have a lot of thoughts. I tell you what, this weekend, this segment, this international break was a perfect microcosm of what the U.S. men's national team is under Greg Berhalter. Incredibly talented and incredibly frustrating at times. If you watch that Jamaica game, no energy, terrible tactics, not a great lineup. They should have lost that game. They were down 1-0 in the last minute of extra time, and a really lucky own goal by Jamaica. And then, of course, we scored 2 in extra time just to get to the final. And then in the final, when they played against Mexico, they played pretty much their best starting 11. There's maybe not a couple guys that were out injured.
Ballard didn't play in that game.
Yeah, or came on very late or whatever. Like, they didn't have their best players necessarily. And of course, Tyler Adams coming back from injury, hadn't played for the U.S. in like 300-something days. They look fantastic, and that's what they can do because Berhalter took the reins off and allowed them to play. We have right now the most talented roster ever in U.S. men's national team history. When you look at somebody like Gio Reyna, who I think we don't know what he's going to be. He's only 21 years old. Mm-hmm. He's had some issues at different clubs, but he is, I think, the most naturally talented player we've ever had at the U.S. men's national team. Now, will he ever become, Clint Dempsey, Landon Donovan, or beyond? We don't know that yet. He's still young. He's still figuring it out. Had some great times at Dortmund, some not great times. He had obviously the dust up with Berhalter for the World Cup last time. This team should be a threat to go to the quarterfinals or even the semifinals of the World Cup. I don't think they're on the level of France or Brazil or Argentina to win it. There's no excuse. I think the only thing holding them back is Greg Berhalter. I think it was in a catastrophe for the U.S. men's team to fire him, look around for a couple months, and then hire him back, thinking he's never been successful at any high level of coaching. He's very conservative. His demeanor, he wears those stupid T-shirts on the sideline, which again has nothing to do with that much, but just everything about him screams mediocre. This team right now, we should be seeing this kind of group of players that you mentioned every single time going forward. The problem for the U.S. team for years has been, with not just Berhalter, but the guys before him, changing the lineup in, bringing in MLS guys, bringing in this. No. You bring in the best 11. This is our golden generation. They should be playing every friendly that they want to play in every kind of competition. We have the Copa America this summer, 2024, where we get to play Argentina, perhaps some of the other big clubs. We're not in. I think with the Uruguay is kind of our big team in our group. This is it, and that's it. Like, we have no World Cup qualifying to worry about. We're already qualified for the World Cup. We have the Gold Cup, which is a joke because we're better than everyone else in CONCACAF. I think the biggest takeaway from that game for me, not only that we could play at a high level, Mexico is so far off the pace right now. They haven't beat us since 2019. They have Memo Ochoa in there, who's a legendary keeper, has been to 5 World Cups, but the guy's over 40 years old. Like, they need some fresh blood. And now, part of me loves that because I want us to dominate the league, but we don't have many big-time games coming up. We're going to have to do these friendlies against these other teams. And even if we're playing England, other teams in a friendly, it's not the same atmosphere. So we need to treat this Gold Cup as our World Cup because we don't have a Euros over here. This is as close as we get. So just to keep things short and sweet, very happy with them beating Mexico again. The Nations League in general for me is kind of a joke. I mean, it's really just us and Mexico. I'm really focused on Copa America. Let the boys play. Let them play freely. If not, if we get embarrassed in the Copa America, it's our last chance to get rid of Berhalter and get somebody else in here. I don't care if they're an American coach or not. This is our one chance in 2026 for the next, I don't know. We'll see. Who knows in 8 years? We could have some young players coming up. There's a great kid, 15-year-old that just signed for Man City. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I mean, but Berhalter is the thing standing in the way, I think, of a potential deep run into the World Cup. So but it was exciting. Tyler Adams' goal was great. Gio Reyna's goal was great.
Yeah.
Pulisic at AC Milan has been fantastic.
He has.
I'd love to see some of these guys at Liverpool, but at this point, Anthony Robinson, super underrated player. I mean, I hear from people in England who have no ties to the U.S. saying this kid could play at a major club. Just fantastic to watch them right now. So I'm very excited. I've been off the U.S. men's national team for a while because I've been so frustrated, and I still hate the fact they brought Berhalter back. But they have the tools to make a deep run of the World Cup.
Yeah, and I like your best point about the Copa America. This is for me. I think even though yes, the hope, the biggest hope is that they play well against big clubs like Argentina. They can show that they can stay on that level because right now the only thing that we have in the past is they tied England 0-0 in the 2022 World Cup, which is okay. I thought it was a solid performance, but nothing out of this world. So a part of me really wants them to play really well in this Copa America, but I'm also expecting, like you said, this is maybe a chance to get rid of Berhalter. And it also, I'm just going to make the assumption that they're going to call up somebody. This is this one guy I do not like on this team. His name's Jesus Ferreira. He plays in the MLS. They keep bringing him up. They keep playing him. He's not a good player. And it might be a way, even if they don't play well, for them to weed out the guys that, okay, these guys are not coming to the World Cup. Or Berhalter, this is the end. We need somebody going really well into that World Cup. But yeah, the Copa America is going to be big this summer. It's also going to be a great summer because the Euros. I enjoy watching the Euros. Yeah. I don't know about you because I enjoy watching European soccer. So
we have Liverpool. I think Manchester United. They're also coming to the U.S. for some friendly games. So there's going to be so. But yeah, the problem that you mentioned there with Ferreira, it's been guys like Kyle Beckerman, like all over the years. Yeah. Chris Wondolowski, who blew our chances in several World Cups ago with a missed sitter. But it's just the problem is that the U.S. national team is so intertwined with MLS, and they want to promote MLS that, not necessarily playing the games at the right spots, or, they want to promote those MLS players. So it's frustrating, but that's welcome to the club. It's been like that for 20 years. All right. My first rundown topic is talking about UMaine. We talked to Jack Webb last week. Fantastic conversation with him about UMaine hockey and UMaine women's basketball. UMaine's women's basketball out of the tournament. They followed Ohio State last week. They played well. They're actually winning early in that first half. Just came down to the height. I mean, it really came down to Ohio State playing on their home floor. Tough atmosphere for UMaine women. Nothing to hang their head at. They were a 15 seed. So looking at next year, they lose Ann Simon, obviously a grad student and their top scorer, 19 points a game. They do get Adriana Smith coming back. She's only a junior, 16.5 points a game this year. But really, Zach, what's interesting too about women's basketball and men's basketball is the transfers, because you look at the roster and say they only had two players who average in double figures, right? And they're losing one of them, so they're gonna have to replace that scoring. Just on that end of the floor. But, so many people are staying as a grad student. So many people can transfer. I'm looking, UMaine women's basketball is looking up. I mean, they're the number one seed this year. There's no reason to think they won't be the number one seed. They have Coach Vachon, who's building a kind of a culture there of winning. So for them, I think this was a first step. Getting to the tournament used to be kind of a rarity when you had Cindy Blodgett and Joanne Palumbo as the coach, who went on to coach at Duke. I mean, those are kind of the glory years of UMaine women's basketball, and I think we might be entering the first step onto the next one. And then I'll touch on hockey. UMaine loses to BU in the hockey semifinals. Of course, BU then gets destroyed by BC. That's a whole nother story. So UMaine hockey gets a pretty favorable draw. They go to Springfield, Massachusetts, to play Cornell on Thursday. Cornell actually beat Boston University back in November in New York City 2-1. So they're not a bad team in any right. What I want to mention this is, again, I think the Neto brothers, like the UMaine has a chance to make a run. I think the other half is Denver, and I think
it's Omaha they're playing.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's an interesting bracket because, like you said, the Cornell game, that's a very winnable game for them. And then Denver has been really up and down. So Maine, in my opinion, has a really good chance to make the Final Four because they
Frozen Four.
Sorry, Frozen Four. Because they got good seeding. They got really good seeding, and if they can show up, they got a good chance.
Yeah, what I'm really frustrated at, obviously I'm a BU fan, is the way that what the NCAA hockey is doing is an embarrassment to the sport. So UMaine gets, BC's the number one overall seed, so they get to go to Providence, right? Mm-hmm. There's also, so the other regionals are in South Dakota, a small town in Missouri, which is a whole nother thing, like what are they doing? And then Springfield, right? BC's the number one overall seed. They basically get to choose where they go. They're going to go to Providence, right? Mm-hmm. BU's the number 2 overall seed. Where do they go? They go to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Now, why do they go into South Dakota versus Springfield? Well, in their infinite wisdom, the NCAA has, every NCAA tournament, whether it's hockey, basketball, or whatever, has host schools for each tournament, right? Mm-hmm. I don't even know what the host school really does. It's not at their arena or anything. But anyway, UMass is the host school of the Springfield Regional. UMass makes the tournament controversially, in my opinion. And because they're the host school, they automatically get to go to their, host site. And the NCAA also says, well, we don't want teams from the same conference playing in the first round. Since UMass is a 4 seed, BU is a 1 seed, BU can't go to the Springfield Regional. And so thus they have to go to South Dakota. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous in my mind that they, first of all, just automatically put a team in their home site. Second of all, why do they care if a conference team plays in the first round? Like, that should not be a factor. I know this is a rarity that it happened to be a 1 seed versus a 4 seed and the 4 seeds hosting, but it's ridiculous. And so BU gets screwed by having to go out to South Dakota. And then this place in Missouri, I forget the 4 teams that are playing there. I think like Michigan State's playing there and North Dakota are both playing in this Missouri regional. Both of those teams average like 6,000 to 13,000 fans per game. The size of the arena in that Missouri regional, 2,500 seats. It's basically the Colisee that they're hosting an NCAA regional with 2 of the biggest programs in the Midwest. I don't know what they were smoking out there in the NCAA this year, but it is ridiculous the way that there's. So my big takeaway: Maine has a better chance of going to the Frozen Four than BU does, even though BU is the better team and better seeded, because BU's got to go out to South Dakota. They're going to have no fans there, and meanwhile Maine gets to go. Look, it's a 4 or 5 hour drive. I'm not saying it's down the road from Orono. That place will be packed. You saw how they packed the TD Garden. I almost said the Fleet Center, the TD Garden, which very impressive. It was basically a home game for UMaine. They're going to go to Springfield. Mm-hmm. So look, it's absurd. Good for Maine. I hope they get out of that regional. I think the Frozen Four is in Minneapolis this year. So again, BU won't be playing any games close to here. Mm-hmm. Just really abysmal. And it's not just me. Denver fans are really upset too, because Denver should have been out in the Midwest, but they also got screwed by having to come back east. So it's totally messed up.
Yeah, the brackets do look a little bit interesting with their locations. I do like your point. I saw that today. North Dakota is getting about 12,000 fans at home games, and they're going to some rinky-dink arena with like it's like 10%.
It's half the size of the Cross Insurance Arena.
Yeah,
like it's basically like the Expo with a hockey rink. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's like the craziest thing, and I don't know why they picked this place. Maybe they want a new team there. I don't know.
I saw tickets for those games already at $1,000.
Yeah, I saw
which
that too.
is good for money, but like, I am going to disagree with you on your point about BU having less of a chance than Maine, because I want to talk about so BU having to go to is it South Dakota or
Sioux Falls, South Dakota? Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting. So I've heard that they're happy about it. The players are happy to go out there. Obviously, in general, it's not the greatest, but looking at their bracket, Boston University has pretty much the easiest game in Frozen in this tournament against RIT. RIT is not good. If BU loses this game, it is the most embarrassing loss I think I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, fair point.
And then Minnesota and Omaha have been very, very inconsistent this year. Minnesota is not the national championship.
Phil
game.
Kessel and
they're not the team that they were last year. I really think that if I don't think it's going to take BU a lot to get to the Frozen Four. I really don't. I think Maine upsetting Denver is a big game for them. I don't think BU playing Minnesota is as big of a game for BU as it is in the same sort of comparison to Maine to Denver. Now,
you might be right. Yeah. I'm going historically. Minnesota's a good team, and just naturally, Minnesota's going to be closer. And I look at it fan wise. Like I would have loved to go to a game in Springfield down there, and so that's why I'm a little bit more emotional about it, because I want to go to games, and I'm not going to South Dakota to watch them play RIT.
100%, and I get your whole point. I agree. Why are we giving UMass, who you said I agree, a somewhat controversial entry into this tournament? Why are we giving them the precedent of their host site instead of BU, who is got one of the top 4 seeds? Why don't they get to play in Massachusetts? And the location does really matter when you get down to the end of this tournament. Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see. The Maine Cornell game is a big one for me, but I think, I obviously this was not in our itinerary, but let's go through our who's our Frozen Four picks. For me, it's Boston College, it's Michigan State. I have Maine and I have BU. That's my 4.
Yeah, I'll go BC, BU, Denver, and and Michigan State as well.
You're gonna go for the top. Okay, that's fair.
Most of the time. I mean, I could see North Dakota pulling it out too, but BC's a wagon. BC should roll to the Natty. I mean, what I saw against BU the other night, 4 for 4 on the power play, and BU's a great team, but BC, it's like they're amazing power play. They got great attackers, and their goalie, who's a freshman, is standing on his head game after game. They haven't lost one game since November, basically. Or one real game. I don't count the Bean Pod. That's kind of a special one-off, but which they lost. But yeah, I think BU will. I mean, as much as I complain, I think they'll roll. I think BC will roll. I think Maine will give Denver a game. I could see Denver winning in overtime. And that again, it's maybe because it's in a small barn and maybe a kind of an odd, with North Dakota and Michigan State out there might be kind of an odd feeling. But yeah, that's who I think will meet in the Frozen Four, and then I think BC wins it all, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have to. If any of my friends from Quinnipiac watch this, they'll be upset to say this, but a lot of people think Quinnipiac could give BC a run because of how that first game went. But it was the first game of the season, they're playing. Oh,
it's right. Yeah, they got to pass Wisconsin first.
Yeah, which is also another factor. But to me, how BC has been so dominant this year, it's unmatched. I don't think anybody could give them a run for their money unless they just didn't show up. Which could happen. But
they're scoring 4, 5, 6 goals a game, so it's depressing.
So I'll head into my second rundown topic now, and we did talk a little bit about some UMaine basketball coaches, and you're going to hear them in this one. So, Jeff, this one is 100%. It's one of my topics, but it's really going to be a lot of your thoughts. So I want you to rank these Maine basketball coaches on let's say their accomplishments as coaches and maybe some of their best, big performances or, conference wins in whatever respective team they're on. But give me a ranking 1 through 6 and give me a little bit of reason why for each ranking. So rank Amy Vachon, Sidney Blodgett, Mike Giordano, Bob Davies, Billy Goodman, and Bob Brown.
All right, I'll kind of start from the bottom. Look, I am conflicted, so I'm not going to put Coach Davies in this, right? I don't want to put him in the rankings because I work with him in the dorms and at school. I think he's a great coach. Let's just say this. I wouldn't put him at the top of this list, and I wouldn't put him at the bottom. He's probably somewhere in the middle, but I'm not going to put him on this list because I don't want this video ever to give me any trouble. So I'm going to keep him out of it. So I would say let's see, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 5 there. So Sidney Blodgett, definitely number 5. I mean, as far as players for Maine basketball history, probably number 1, but just a disastrous tenure at UMaine. I'm not going to go into all of the reasons and not allegations, but there's a lot of behind the scenes things that people just didn't like her. Mm-hmm. Not going to go into that. Just the results speak for themselves. She was kind of a failure at UMaine, so she's going to be number 5. I'm going to put Mike Giordano at number 4. He's related to the guests that we're going to have on the show today. He's just one of those guys that just cranks out good season after good season after good season. He's won some state championships. But as far as compared to some of the others, currently I'll put him at number 4. Number 3, I'll put Amy Vachon. I think she's the one that could absolutely shoot up the list here in the next few years. Fantastic player. What she's building up there in UMaine is something really special, and it's great to see Coach Markwood on the men's side also making Maine kind of on the map. Even though, again, I'm not really a UMaine fan. They're one of our rivals at BU. I want to see them succeed because I want to see them play some top teams in Portland or even Bangor area and maybe go to see some games. So she's the one that right now maybe is number 3 on my list, but it could end up being number 2, number 1 eventually. Number 2, Billy Goodman. He did it. He did it at Deering. He's done it at Cheverus. Just knows how to coach girls basketball. Super intense guy. Macaulay. Sorry, not Deering. Macaulay. Guided them to all those state championships, long winning streaks. Definitely rubs some people the wrong way. He's a very aggressive coaching style, but knows how to win. So nothing against him. And of course, Bob Brown, who again, you probably never even heard of. 600 wins over the course of 50 years coaching, coached in a lot of different classes. I remember her most at Cheverus in the late 2000s, early 2010s. His teams were unreal, especially for a small private school. He had a lot of guys come in and play well. They won a lot of state championships. Retired. I forget how many retired. Of course, his son was a coach in the NBA for a while. I don't know if he still is, but he was a coach of the 76ers for a bit. So Bob Brown's number 1 coach for me on that list. There may be others at lower classes that I'm just not as familiar with, but those are my top 5. Bob Brown, again, I couldn't stand him because TA was a rival of him, but you had to respect what he could do on the court. I will throw in Mike Nelson in there too. Coach now, he coaches Skowhegan, is back at TA basketball. Hasn't won a states at TA, but just want to give a shout out to him because he's a great coach. But yeah, a lot of great coaches around. There's definitely some that aren't even on this list that would be worth mentioning. But you gave me the list, so I'm going to give you the list. Coach Davies is right in there somewhere as well.
Yeah, I agree. I like your list. Bob Brown for me is one of those, like you said, I can't really give you an accurate ranking just because I'm not really familiar. That was a lot earlier than my time. But I like your rankings. I would definitely put Amy Vachon higher. I think that I have seen her coach. I think she's a great coach. She's got good energy. And I think this season shows that she knows how to utilize her players. And we'll see that, like we just mentioned earlier, they're losing one of their double-digit scorers. Who's she going to utilize? And can they get back out of the America East and back to the tournament next year too? And that'll just even further, put her up on that list.
And some of it is how you recruit. You have to know how to recruit and not just recruit high school kids anymore. It's how do you work in the transfer portal? That's something a coach is going to have to do.
For sure. But I got to give a shout out to Bob Davies before you head to that next topic.
Sure. If you want to rank him high, go for it.
He's one of my top, maybe one or two for me. Growing up and listening to him on the sidelines, working, with TATV and being able to hear him through my headset while we were broadcasting. He's got a great mentality. He's a great person, and he puts that into his coaching, and it shows. And I was sad to see him leave TA coaching wise, but great coach, and had to give him a shout out.
Other people I'd like to throw in there just as we wrap up: Lon Berthium at Gorham, Joe Russo, boys basketball as well, and Kevin Millington, boys basketball for South Portland. Obviously, he's won a lot too. It's just, for me, it's not just about how much you win; it's the longevity. So,
yeah.
All right. Speaking of Lon Berthium and Gorham, my second topic is Mackenzie Holmes and the Indiana Hoosiers moving on in the NCAA tournament. They defeat 75-68 win over Oklahoma. It was the 5 seed. Indiana, is the 3 seed. Holmes with 29 points, 6 rebounds. Of course, they were playing at their home site, which is what the higher seeds get to do in women's basketball. There was, I don't know if you saw this, Zach, and maybe you can edit this into the podcast. There was a photo taken after the game. I don't know if the students rushed the court or the players went into the student section, but it's like a massive humanity, and right in the middle there is Mackenzie Holmes with a big smile on her face.
I saw that photo.
She put on her X. I mean, it's just, what she's done there is something special. She's a grad student there. She's been there now 5 years. Again, she was a dominant force in Maine high school basketball for Gorham. It still was like, wow, Indiana, how's she going to do when she plays at Indiana? And she has defied all expectations and become one of the best players in the entire country. Definitely right up there with Cindy Blodgett as the most accomplished player in the history of women's high school basketball for Maine, at least. But they play against undefeated South Carolina on Friday in Albany.
The run is over.
I mean, yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, I think they're 34-0, something like that. South Carolina, they are incredibly good. Holmes is the best player on the team. If she can do 29-6, that's great. They're going to need another 2 people to score, 15 to 20 points, which they a little bit inconsistent on that front. So I would ask you, where does Holmes, in your mind, rank of all-time Maine athletes, male or female, at least for their college accomplishments?
She is. That's a tough
it's tough because like Cindy Blodgett played in the WNBA, right?
Yeah.
Now she played at UMaine. They'd never really won any tournament games. They played really tough teams and had great games, but she was kind of a unicorn on those teams. Mm-hmm. Holmes is on a Big Ten team. They have other people. They can make a deep run in the tournament. We don't know what she's going to do, but like at this point, I can't think of another player who's gone off to college and played a more prominent role in a big time college, really male or female yet. Obviously with Cooper Flag coming next year, that'll changes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's interesting. It makes me think about right now. I hadn't even thought about this. Is what is her plans next year? Because I'm pretty sure she's out of eligibility after this season. So is she gonna go to the WNBA? Is she gonna maybe play somewhere else? But definitely one of the top ones for me. Again, my sort of rankings for most Maine athletes is cut smaller just because I'm not as I'm not
as old.
I wanted to try to find a better way to say that to
experience.
Not. I don't have as much experience in this game, but yeah, definitely one of the top players. Has put up some incredible seasons. I am all for giving these players credit. My biggest thing is I want the whole world to know how great Maine basketball is, but I have to say this. I have seen a lot today and after that game against Oklahoma that, oh, she had her breakout game, or she had I don't even know what the word is. I forget what it is. Like, she had the amazing game.
Mm-hmm.
She had a great game. She was matched up against a freshman playing the 5, and she did the same move because the freshman did not know how to guard it to score like 26 out of the 29 points. I think she had a great game, but I think they could have definitely lost that game to Oklahoma. That was a very losable game. I thought it was a great game, but I didn't see it as amazing as some other people maybe saw it yesterday. But that doesn't. I'm not diminishing her entire season.
You're basically crapping on the media, not really her. Like, it's
100%.
If I'm her, I'm doing the same move every time. You're just like, let's call. And I'm like that all the time. And I think the problem in sports media, with a quick sidetrack, a lot of times people will take what you just said and say like, oh, he's crapping on Mackenzie Holmes, or he's like, for me, I'm crapping on Caitlin Clark. No. It's the response. Like, not everything has to be the best thing you've ever seen. They don't all have to be the GOAT, right? I'm sorry, that's just not reality. So people always it's recency bias, right?
Exactly. And you're 100% right. She knew that freshman couldn't guard. She gets in the paint. She fakes one way, rolls the other, and a little fadeaway, little layup. That she did it the same thing over and over again, and she utilized that and to her advantage. And that's why she scored 29 points. You're 100%. It's the media looking at this as, oh my God, Mackenzie Holmes it was a great game, but there was a very close game against Oklahoma, and they're going to have to play a lot better against South Carolina. But has had some incredible years with Indiana, had incredible years with Gorham when she was in high school. Just a phenomenal player, and like you said, one of the top players to come out of Maine for any sport at this point. I can't rank Cooper Flagg yet because we haven't seen what he's done in college. I obviously think he's going to be incredible, but no, it was a great game. I'm definitely going to watch the South Carolina game. I watched most of the Indiana Oklahoma game. I missed some points because I was busy with some other things, but we'll see. A good start and some good scoring. Maybe South Carolina not showing up. They could definitely move on, but I did also see that if Notre Dame wins their game and Indiana wins this game, Notre Dame and Indiana will meet, and we will have a matchup of Mackenzie Holmes and Anna DeWolf, two Mainers going head-to-head.
One Mainer in the Final Four. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be pretty miraculous. But no, it's definitely a great player. So I will head into my last topic, and this one is I'm still interested to see what your thoughts are. So, recently in the NHL, Tom Wilson got a 6-game suspension for a high stick on a Maple Leafs player. He was a youngster, maybe played, I think it was his first season. I don't know if you've seen the high stick, but it is it's the most
egregious.
Yeah, it was horrible. Like, he went full force to the face on purpose, and you see it. And I was talking about this with somebody. When he hit him and the guy went down, he held him down. He knew what he was doing. He knew that his hit was going to take him out. But as someone who's a Bruins fan for years, all I get from people who aren't Bruins fans is, oh, Brad Marchand is the worst, dirtiest player. He's the most notorious player. Blah, blah, he's a rat. That's all I ever hear. But I think with this suspension, it puts Wilson on the same level, if not more notorious or dirty than Brad Marchand. Now, Marchand still holds the record for most suspensions in NHL history with 8, and most games missed in 28. And he's also, if you account for the amount of money he's lost in salary from those games and suspensions, it's over $1 million, which is kind of ridiculous. But Wilson has 6 suspensions, and his suspensions are the games are about the same, but he's had longer ones. A couple years ago, 7 games for boarding Brandon Carlo and a bunch of roughing suspensions. I don't know if you remember about 2 years ago with the game versus the Rangers with the horrible hit on Panarin and then basically just fighting the rest of the game. Egregious. But I guess I want to get your thoughts on it. Obviously, Tom Wilson, Brad Marchand, both very notorious players, but I guess who do you think is dirtier is the question.
Yeah, and I'm not that biased because I don't really follow hockey that much in terms of I don't really would say the Bruins are my favorite team. I don't really cheer for a team. No, I think Tom Wilson is the dirtier player. I think Marchand is a dirty player, right? And he gets a lot of pass in this town because people love their hockey and he's a great offensive player. That's the difference. Tom Wilson is a good offensive player or a good player as far as points wise, but Brad Marchand is like a top end offensive talent in the league. That being said, it should not excuse what Brad Marchand has done in
course.
his career. You can't do that. He should have a checkered history when he leaves here. His legacy should be checkered. It's just that kind of thing. When you use your stick as a weapon, I have no sympathy for you. It's not in the heat of the moment. You're just not a very good human being. So I say Wilson's the worst, but Marchand should also continue to get some warranted attention for his dirtiness over the years. And it's too bad because he doesn't need to do that. Like I think someone like Wilson almost needs that to be in the league. He needs that edge to become an NHL player because he's not scoring, 40, 50 goals a year. Marchand doesn't need that. It's just frustrating for him. So no, I'd say Wilson's the worst. And it's one of the reasons why it's hockey can never really grow beyond that kind of regional expertise, because you have these guys, you see these clips, and you're like, oh boy, like what is the league doing when they're encouraging things like this? Meaning sometimes the suspensions don't fit the crime. Now this one I think probably does, but then other times where it's like guys are getting fined $2,448 for a horrible hit because that's what the CBA allows. So I think that's where hockey needs to look at it and say, if you want to allow fighting once in a while, that's fine, but when it gets to this stuff, these guys should be gone for multiple dozens of games and really make them hurt in their wallet.
100%, and I agree. And it might be a little bit of bias because I'm a Bruins fan. I do think it's very close. Marchand is a dirty player. People always like to say it to me, "Oh, he's a rat." I'm like, yeah, he's done some dirty things. The low bridge suspension he got on Sammy Salo was horrible. I don't know if you remember last season, he got suspended. I think it was 7 games, or maybe it might have been 8 games, when he went up to Tristan Jarry, the goaltender for the Penguins, and just slashed him. Like literally just slashed him for no reason. And he deserved it. He's also very known for slew footing in the past as well. But I just feel like, especially what you see from Marchand is these were very scattered among his career. Wilson, they're very clumped up, and it's a lot of the same. It's the same suspensions, which to me shows that this he's doing the same thing over and over again, and he doesn't care. He's not worried about it. And I also think you look at Marchand this year as a captain, hasn't been in those same situations, has really settled down. And I think that he's somebody who's trying to turn it around and give himself a good name, where Wilson just like he high sticked that guy for absolutely no reason. And now he's going to have to sit out 7 games. Just sit out 7 games. It wasn't like anger. It wasn't the two teams were going after each other. It was just because, and it's horrible to see. But I agree. The CBA rule is with the only allowing, I think it's 3,000 or 4,000 is the maximum you can get on a fine is ridiculous. These guys should be fined more to send a message. But Wilson, I think, has surpassed Marchand. Even though the amount of suspensions is less, I think Wilson has surpassed him in, who's the more dirty player.
Definitely. All right, last topic for me. This kind of released here on Tuesday, the new NFL kickoff rule. The NFL's changing the way kickoffs are done, trying to make it more entertaining, but also safer, whatever that means. So now the kickoff stays at the same spot, but now the players on the kickoff team start at the opposing 40-yard line. Nobody can move until the ball is touched by somebody out back there. And also the onside kick now has to be announced before you do it, and it can only be in the fourth quarter. How is this going to affect everything? I think that kicker's just going to kick it through the end zone more. I haven't confirmed this, that now a kickoff goes to the 30, so they're trying to penalize you to kicking it to the 30. So basically, one team's going to be on the 40. I think the other team's going to be on the 25-yard line. And so everyone stands in place until the receiver catches the ball, and then they kind of go together. They did in the XFL. They're trying the NFL. I don't know. I'm skeptical that it's going to work, because I think as soon as, again, the returning team starts getting an advantage, perceived advantage or a real advantage when they start practicing this, then the kickers their coach is going to say kickers just put it in the end zone. I'd rather have them give the ball at the 30-yard line. So yeah, I think the NFL also came out today and said that the first week game, the Eagles, I forget who they're playing, it's going to be in Brazil and on Peacock only. I think that this Peacock only stuff is ridiculous. Amazon Prime is something that millions and millions and millions of people have already. That's bad enough as it is for Thursday night, but now you're putting regular season, normal Sunday games on Peacock. I have Peacock because I like the Premier League. If I didn't want the Premier League, I would not be having Peacock. It's a terrible system.
I agree.
Just like Paramount Plus was terrible for the U.S. men's national team game the other night. I had to watch it in Spanish on Univision or whatever it was. But anyway, new kickoff rule. They focus on such the wrong things. They get the kickoff rule. They got rid of the hip tackle, which, I'm not saying the hip tackle is a great thing, but I don't know what defenders are supposed to do nowadays. Plus, you're putting another penalty as a subjective
penalty into the hands of the referees. You think they're going to screw that up or not? Of course they're going to screw it up, because now they're going to have to determine, was that a hip whatever tackle or not. It's just the NFL just can't get out of its own way. I think the new kickoff rule, I mean, it looks really funky on videos I've seen. I don't know what's going to be like in real life, but I'm always going to assume it's going to be bad, because they're not really, they don't really care about player safety that much. They just care about more points, more entertainment, so they can sell more advertisements and more digital only digital only things. So not a fan of it. We'll see. Maybe I'll stand corrected in 7 or 8 months when it starts, but not a big fan, especially the onside kick. Now the days of the surprise onside kick are now over, which is sad.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a huge NFL like rule changing. I don't really get upset about that stuff, but I think you'll see in the first couple of games, it's either going to be something that everyone goes, "Wow, this is actually kind of cool. Like, it's a difference, and maybe it's going to work," or people are going to say, "Nope, I hate it. It's horrible. What are they doing?" When it comes to the hip tackle rule, the issue I have with it is that if referees in the NFL could give defensive players, a little bit of leeway, like a little bit of wiggle room with that was a close one, I'm going to let it slide, or that was a little too much, we're going to call that one. I would be fine with it, but that's not how the referees work in the NFL. It is absolute one end of the spectrum or the other. It's either most egregious call when there was nothing, or they don't call it when it was 100% a horrible tackle. And so when you have referees like that, when you make big rule changes like this, it's never going to go well. It's just never going to go well. And I've just accepted that with the NFL, that they make these changes that don't work out. But we'll see. I mean, I don't think these affect the game in a huge way. But maybe that, like you said, maybe in 7 or 8 months when we start this up, maybe it will be a huge change. Maybe that'll really affect the way teams score, the way that the game runs, and who knows. But it's definitely interesting, and I don't think many people were happy about it. I don't know what you saw in the media, but I saw a lot of people just basically shaking their heads saying, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah, and it's not like anybody wants people to get hurt, and there are some bad tackles from behind, basically. We'll call it the hip, whatever they call it. But the tackles from behind, basically, yes, those are bad. But again, if you're a defensive player, what are you supposed to do when guys are running, like a guy like, who's the Tennessee running back? Derrick Henry is running at you. Like, you're not supposed to go to them for legs anymore. You can't go for their head anymore. So, and if you try to go for you try to tackle them normally, they're going to shove you off. Like, I don't know. It's again, always go back to the money. And the NFL loves more offense because more people will play fantasy, more people will bet on the overs and unders and everything else. That's what it's about. They want more points. They'd love for games to be 40 to 30 every week. So always assume they're trying to get more money out of you.
Yeah, for sure. And if Derrick Henry is now a Baltimore Raven,
I know. He's going to look cool in that uniform. I'll say that.
He's going to look cool, but will that win them?
They're still going to choke. No, they're still going to choke. They're the Ravens. It's Lamar Jackson. It's John Harbaugh. They are chokers.
That combo. I think that they're going to come up with something.
Running backs are irrelevant.
No, they are not. Here's the thing. Well, okay, yes, in some situations they are. But let me explain something to you. Lamar Jackson, a lot of times, I don't. You see this. Everyone sees this. He tries to run. He has an idea in his head. It doesn't work out. They lose yards. They fall back, and they can't throw the ball. So what are you going to do on a 3rd and 12 when you can't throw the ball, right? Having the option of Derrick Henry, I think, gives Lamar Jackson so much more room to actually play, and he's a great playmaker, actually make plays happen, actually get offense moving. Baltimore is my Super Bowl pick for this next year, or at least to make the Super Bowl from the AFC. It's going to be crazy. And mark my words, if I get one of the top 4 or 5 picks in my fantasy draft, I'm taking Derrick Henry.
Good, because I want to be. Then let me make sure I'm in your league, so I'll win that league easy.
All right, if you say so. All right, we are going to head into our interview now for episode 4. As we mentioned before, we were talking about Mike Giordano, and we're going to talk now to his son, Tony Giordano. If you don't know, Tony Giordano is the athletic trainer at Thornton Academy. Been there for a long time, someone that Jeff and I know very well. So let's head into that interview with Tony Giordano.
All right, we're now joined by our guests for this episode of the Main Rundown is Tony Giordano, who is the certified athletic trainer at Thornton Academy, has been for many years, and also a podcast producer. We're going to get into both of those topics tonight. Tony, how you doing so far in the spring season that just started for you?
I'm great, guys. Really appreciate the invite. I've listened to all the episodes you have out to this point, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm stoked to be here, guys. Thanks.
Awesome. So, talk about just in general, how do you get into athletic training? Is that something you thought of for a long time? Just what is that process to get to where you are today?
So, growing up, I lived in the gym. My dad is a basketball coach, so I just enjoyed being part of a team from the get go, and then played sports in high school, and then thought to myself, how do I make this a career? And I went to the University of Southern Maine, and they had athletic training as a major. So the start of my third year of college, I jumped into the AT major and banged out a 4-year program in 3 years with some summer courses and just kind of get everything done as quick as possible because I was behind the 8 ball. And the rest is history. 15 plus years in now, still doing it.
Wow. So, as an athletic trainer, anybody who goes to games, they see the trainer on the sideline. What types of injuries do you all have to be ready for? You're not doctors, but you have to be ready for probably just about anything.
A ton of musculoskeletal injuries, right? I mean, that's the orthopedic side of things is the bread and butter. It's the stuff we learn in school. It's the stuff that we're going to see the most of in athletics. Depending on the sport, you see different things, but we do have to kind of be ready for anything. Like we do some gen med stuff in college. We do rotations with doctors to try to learn, more of that stuff too, just to be exposed to it. And then the longer I've done this, the more we are exposed to those things and find out new things and hear of different cases. And you just, experience is the best teacher with that stuff. So we're ready for all the musculoskeletal and, orthopedic type injuries, but we've got to be ready for everything, cardiac arrest, concussion, you name it. It can happen on a field or in the rink.
Yeah. So one of the things, I mean, we talked about this. You're coming, obviously tonight from being at a scrimmage at Thornton Academy.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about, like obviously this is a later night for you, obviously for work. Or what are some of the pros and cons of working this type of job, this type of hours, and what that system's like for you, and maybe how's that changed from when you started and to where you are now?
That's a great question, actually, because it has changed a lot in the 15 plus years I've done it. When I first started, I was an assistant at Shevers High School in Southern Maine, and I worked like 25 hours a week. I probably worked more than I should have, but at the same time, I was young, eager, out of college, wanted to make a name for myself, get a job, get a full-time job down the line. Now, the hours change, right? Every season's different. Some nights you're going to be there till 8, 9, 10 o'clock. Football nights in the fall, sometimes it's 11 o'clock if we're on the road. We got to go to Bangor. We got to go to Bedford, New Hampshire for a football game. It's going to take some time to get to and from. So you might have a late night. And this time of year, not as much because we're, in between. People are just practicing and getting ready for their actual regular season games coming up. But we had, boys lacrosse tonight on the turf till 8:35. So you guys were gracious enough to start us a little later tonight because I was stuck there with those guys playing scrimmaging themselves to kind of get ready for their regular season.
So in this job, not just yours but mine too. We're on the sideline a lot. You hear a lot from coaches. You hear a lot from parents. You're not really allowed to talk back. Certain sports certainly are more intense than others. So what are some, without no names or schools, you don't need to say that. What are some of the craziest things you've seen or heard from either a coach or a parent? Like I say, like even just the sidelines I've been on, you hear some crazy stuff or see some crazy stuff. So over your years, what have been some of the crazier things that you remember? Maybe they're funny crazy too.
I mean, every day is different, which, yeah, you're going to see and hear different things. And then when you're working with, the high school ranks, 14, 15, 16, sometimes middle school too, you never know what you're going to hear outside your door or on the field, right? Anything is fair game, whether it's good or bad. It's funny. Every coach is different. Every kid is different. So you're just, I mean, I'm not going to obviously get into specifics with certain, injuries or tough situations, but you always, there are many times over the course of my 15 years where I've just needed to bite my tongue. Like I can't, if you know me personally, it hurts and I keep it to myself and let it, it's not, you got to be professional. You got to put on a good face for both your athlete too. Sometimes you're doing the best for the kid and you're not necessarily doing what anybody wants, but it is going to be the right thing in the long run. So I've heard, you name it, I had a cheerleader one year tell me I was the worst athletic trainer ever.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I just laughed at her because it was funny because like she didn't mean it. She was a kid that I got along with pretty well, and she'd been in my office off and on throughout the season, and I wouldn't do something that she wanted me to do because she didn't need it. And I explained to her why. And then she just kind of huffed off. And so I told her coach, I said, hey, so and so said this to me. And she, the next day, she came down and she's like, I'm sorry, you're not the worst athletic trainer ever. So, you never know what you're going to hear. You just have to kind of roll with the punches.
So you mentioned too, not getting into specifics on HIPAA is a big thing, obviously with you. How do you draw that line? Because, obviously we've seen the pros, like there's no privacy basically. We as the fan feel like we're entitled to know exactly what's going on with you. You as a trainer, you have an obligation to the parents, obviously, the coaches, but beyond that, it's hard. How do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis to say, all right, this is who I can tell about this. This is who I shouldn't tell about this.
Right. Yeah. And everything is essentially off limits as far as telling anybody outside of said organization. I work for Maine Health, so I'm under the big umbrella of the state's biggest medical provider, really. And if we're not the biggest, we're the second. I think we're the biggest. And it's a big deal, right? You're not telling anybody. I remember and there have been kids over the course of my 15 years at all three schools that I've worked at where a big name has maybe gotten hurt and everybody wants to know what happened. And I'm too close to it, and you can't say that. And I take athletic training students from University of Southern Maine as well as the University of New England, and it's a good teachable moment when those things happen because they know stuff too, and they're in college and maybe don't know you can't say things to outside people. So you may go back to your school, and I know we did this, and talk about stuff that happens, and people want to know because they live in the community. UNE is a neighboring town to Saco and Thornton Academy. So people want to know what happened at TA last night, and you just got to keep it to yourself as far as what happened. So
yeah,
it's really important.
An example of that, I remember back in 2013, first game of the year, at South Portland, Andrew Libby gets severely hurt. I start getting, because it was a game that wasn't that big of a game. I was fielding texts from all sorts of people, reporters that I knew, others to just say, what's going on? And for me, it's easier because I'm not involved. I didn't know what was really happening. Like I don't know what injuries, but it must be tough sometimes just getting inundated with that. And how do you talk to parents about some of these injuries? Like they're going to jump to conclusions, like as far as your training and your education, to be like, this is how you talk to a parent who just saw their 15-year-old girl get bashed in the head with a ball or a racket or something. They're going to be hysterical. How do you kind of do the bedside manner part of it, considering you're not in a hospital setting?
Yeah, that takes practice. And honestly, early on, you're not good at it. You're just like anything. The more you do it, you get better at it. And you're dealing with different personalities almost every time. So being able to kind of read the situation, read the people that you're dealing with, it helps to have a relationship. It helps to be at a place for a while because most people know me now, having been at Thornton Academy for almost 13 years. It makes... I come in, people know, Tony's here. Okay, he'll be able to take care of this. Most people kind of know that about me at this point. But early on, you don't have that. And you've got to kind of learn your way and talk to different people. And sometimes the reaction to an injury, whether it be from the kid, a coach, or a parent, depending on who you're talking to, can be really negative. And then it goes away quickly. They're just kind of letting out whatever frustration happened. And knowing when to kind of back off for a second and then get back in there and explain what's going on. It's an art. It's not something you get good at overnight. And I mean, I still make mistakes and still, I'm learning every day of how to handle that because you meet new people and different ways of kind of doing things every day.
Yeah. So one of the things I really wanted to touch on here is concussions. Concussions are just such it's such a
hot button.
It's a interesting injury. There's no really like, it's just the way I see it is like it's really hard to tell exactly how a person's doing, especially when you're at the high school level. When you have to ask a kid, how you're feeling. And a lot of high school kids aren't going to tell you a straight answer, right? They're not going to give it to you how they're actually feeling because most of the time those kids want to get back out in the field. So exactly what I had just mentioned. How has dealing with concussions been like for you, as like athletic trainer at TA and dealing with sort of players or coaches who want to get back on the field a little too early and what's that like for you?
So I would say that in the 15 years I've been out of school, 10 of them, it's been a hot button issue. 10 or almost 12 of them. Like my first year, I didn't really take it. I took it seriously, but people weren't talking about it like it's been in the news for the last decade or so. Um, it is obviously super important. It's our brain. And most at this point in 2024, I would say every coach that I work with understands the expectation. If there's a worry about it, if we see something happen in a game or a practice that is a little off and we're not sure and we want to pull an athlete out to be safe, even almost everybody gets that at this point. The kid isn't always happy about it, which I understand, but I think even that has changed in the last 5 or 6 years, even maybe 7 or 8, where kids are more apt to tell you, "Hey, I don't feel right. Something's up here. Let's figure out what's going on, so I don't go back out there and make things gravely worse," because that can certainly happen. So, really important thing, something that has definitely been in the spotlight, and everybody looks at it. The other thing that is tough about that is, like, say you roll your ankle, right? It gets swollen, it gets big, your knee, same idea. You don't necessarily see it with a concussion. Somebody gets hit, they look fine. They maybe not be fine, but 3 or 4 days out, they look kind of like themselves. They're kind of acting like themselves because they're on the mend, they're on the recovery. But you're like, why can't you get out there? Like, shouldn't you be able to get back out there? Well, it's not that easy, that quick. There's a protocol that's in place and, international rules for these things now. So we follow that stuff.
So following up on that, let's go beyond concussions. Let's go to the normal run-of-the-mill, obviously not like a broken bone, but something else. And, we hear a lot of coaches, the difference between being, hurt and being injured. In general, when the coaches are saying, hey, can they go? Like, how much where's your, I don't say where your loyalties lie, but you're trying to maintain, especially with the home coach, you're trying to maintain a constant positive, relationship with them. You see them every day. They're going to ask you, when they ask you the question, are they good to go? The kid may not be ready to go. How do you kind of gauge through that part of the process in game, especially?
I actually, in game versus practice, obviously different. Sports can be you only play one game a week with football. That can be a little difficult. Whereas basketball, you might play 3, hockey might play 2 or 3, lacrosse, et cetera. So you're going to get different things for different. I mean, this is kind of why I do what I do, guys. It's different every day. And I'm not, okay, I'm going to go sit in front of my computer for 9 hours and then go home and then do it again tomorrow, whether it be at home now for people or in a cubicle in an office back pre-COVID, all that stuff. Are there days that I wish I did some of that? Sure. But the fact that we get to do stuff new every day is kind of fun to me. And this is one of those things, like, it's a puzzle every day. You've got to figure out, you might have 15 people have something happen that you've got to kind of make a quick decision on. It needs to be the right one. And then you need to communicate that to whoever is, involved in said situation. So in a game, you have the people you go to on the coaching staff that you can say, so-and-so is going to be out for a little bit, or so-and-so is done for the day, and we'll reevaluate as the days go on. In football, that's typically one of the assistant coaches. I'll grab Coach Morrison or Coach Agresti and say, hey guys, so-and-so's out for right now. I'll reevaluate at halftime. Or so-and-so's done for the day. We got to find their replacement. And they're, okay, cool. They grab their sheet and it's easy. Same thing with, hockey or lacrosse or soccer. You've got that person that you go to who can either relay to the coach, or sometimes it's the head coach, depending on the situation. So it's not that the head coaches aren't easy to get to, but sometimes depending on the situation, they're in the middle of coaching. So you grab one of the, that's the reason we have assistants. So it's, my allegiances lie with what's the safe thing and who can I help get back safely. Sometimes they can play with whatever's going on, and we try to protect it, or we try to tape it up and get back out there with something that is, playable. Sometimes they can't. And that's when I'm like, nope, sorry, we're done here. It's high school athletics. This isn't the end of the world. We'll get you back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So I got to ask you, because this is just an interesting question. What is the weirdest or most interesting either substance or thing that is in your athletic training bag? Something that you maybe have to use for, and like an athlete uses, or something that you have? What's the most interesting thing in your bag?
I'm thinking like the mustard, pickle juice, that kind of. Again, we've had some players at TA football that have like, I need mustard on the sideline. Is there stuff that you carry normally or anything like that?
I had somebody ask me for mustard or pickle juice tonight. So, and I did carry Mustard for a long time, but now I'm kind of the mind of if you're at that point, you're cramping to that point, Mustard in the third quarter of your game isn't going to make it a ton better. But some of it's placebo, 1 in 5. They feel better. They get back out there. They finish the game, and they're like, "Oh man, thanks for the Mustard. Thanks for the assist, Tony. Like, we appreciate you." So, Mustard is one of the weirder ones we've had in the kit before. I have this wound seal stuff that we use, which I haven't had to use it much, but you get a guy like a quarterback or a pitcher where they don't want tape on their hands because they want to be able to throw still. But if they got a pretty gnarly gash, which I've had happen before, we just cake that stuff on there. You stop bleeding, but it takes forever to get off. But they can finish the game out and, don't have to be taped up. So there's some of that stuff.
Athletic training, or to say conditioning, strength and conditioning has changed quite a bit just in the last 10 to 15 years. Tons of students are taking advantage of off-site programs to train all year round, whether not just in a sport, but just general pliability, flexibility, weight training. Have you noticed with a lot of these students, these even middle tier athletes, paying a lot of money to do some of these programs that you've been involved with before, as far as the injury rate, have you noticed a different, like the injury rate is going down because of that? Or is it really just more about when they're performing, they're, performing at a higher level? Or have you noticed a correlation between more of this off-site, off-season training regarding injuries, maybe muscular injuries more often than not?
I think it certainly helps you to be ready to play if you're working outside of, like, the weight room is one of the most important places you can be for any sport that you're going to do, and training correctly for those things. Like you can hurt yourself in the weight room too if you're not doing it right. Those things are really important, and it was something that I took seriously when I was an athlete many moons ago. 20 years ago, I lived in the weight room because I'm not a big guy. It was the only way to get on the football field. I need to be strong, so it's important. It's certainly evolved from me doing 4 exercises in the South Portland High School weight room in 1999, 2000 to where it is today, where we've got way better knowledge of that. I work with people that do this every day, and it's important, I would say. And I do think that it does help people especially who put the time in, keep them from having, some of those longer term funky soft tissue injuries that, they're strong. They can get through some of those things.
So when you look at, specific events, whether we're in the fall or in the spring, I mean, the winter, we're mostly inside. Can you give me, obviously, this is something that we came up with for a question because of how terrible the weather has been in the last couple of months. At least it's been terrible in Connecticut. I don't know. I mean, Maine, I've just heard stories.
Lots of rain.
Yeah. Can you tell me what the worst weather you've had to stand in during the fall season or the spring season, whatever it's
in general? Is it the cold? Is it the rain? Is it the wind? Like, what's the most miserable that you're standing there and you're just like, I just wish I was somewhere else?
So yeah, in the cold rain of late March, early April, very much like today, although it was a little warmer than typical, is very tough. We've had a couple of football games over the years that have been really cold. We played Scarborough in a regional championship 7 or 8 years ago. That was like 11 degrees. I think the real feel was 11 degrees, which is one of the coldest games I've ever covered. When I was at Cheverus, fall of 2009, we were at Wyndham for the regional championship, and like the remnants of a tropical storm came through, and it absolutely downpoured on us for the entire game. So like getting out of there, just being waterlogged. Like it wasn't super cold, which was nice because it was tropical storm rain in November, but you couldn't get away from it. You were just soaked. So yeah, you're going to be in all kinds of weather, I guess. If you do this job, you just got to deal with it.
Last question on athletic training before we head to podcast talk. What's the one thing you would change about athletic training for high school? Is there something, and whether it's actually new profession, there's a lot of debate about turf versus grass fields. Obviously the cost concerns about having a grass field and maintaining that versus turf, but we've had a lot of people saying, especially at the higher levels, that turf isn't great. But what's the one thing that you would change if you could have a magic wand right now and change your profession?
Man, there's a bunch of things. I think I didn't realize in college how much I'd have to explain what I do, which is fine. I have no problem telling people, this is what I do. This is why I do it. This is how I became to be, this. And this helps, stuff like this, being able to have a little bit of a platform and show some people. But I didn't know that it's like, oh, what do you mean athletic train? Do you like train them like you train horses? Like, no, that's not, that's not what we do. Like, we're not really named super well as a profession, because we do deal a lot with injuries, do deal a lot with rehab, and then also the training side of things too. We can do kind of all of it. We're one of those, jack of all trades types of people. So having to explain that, and then I wish most people would read whatever the policy and procedure is going into their season. And I say it at every one of our parent nights, please read the policies on whatever injury, because undoubtedly some of you are going to come across this. And we'll have the conversation again then, but I don't want you to be blindsided by it 3 months from now when your son or daughter gets hurt. So those two things I wish more people would pay a little bit of attention to, just because it'll make my life easier. But it is what
We'll
it
clip
is.
that to make sure that people, make sure they take a look.
Yeah.
So let's move into some podcast talk, as Jeff said. So before we talk about podcasts in general, let's go through, talk about your podcast, how it started, why you started it, why you keep going to this day. I mean, last I checked, I think you guys are close to 200. Maybe you're over 200 at this point.
Yeah, 210 I think are out as of this.
Wow, that's
with
crazy.
2 more recorded and like 2 or 3 more scheduled.
So yeah, give the synopsis for all the listeners out there.
So it was early. A friend of mine growing up, my buddy Nate, he and I we love music. We always joked about doing this, starting a podcast. We've been talking about it since like 2012 probably. And then he moved to California. So it was like, we can't do it. Like, this isn't going to happen. And then early 2020, right before the pandemic hit, another friend of ours, Anthony, and myself went out and had lunch and wrote down a bunch of ideas of like things that we could talk about. And music is the thing that we love. So we were like, let's just come up with a million music topics that we could talk about and just see if any of them stick. And let's call Nate, because Zoom was becoming a thing. Skype was a thing. This is a thing. We didn't know how big it was going to get with the pandemic, but we knew it was coming. So we did that. We were like, we came up with, I don't even know, 50 topics. So, okay, there's something here. Let's call Nate. We call Nate. We get together. We record the day that the world shut down, the first episode.
Oh, so it's your fault.
Yeah. I went over to Anthony's house, and we were in his basement, and we hooked Nate up on Skype, and the three of us recorded a 45-minute episode about COVID, because we had no idea, and we had no idea what we were talking about. Some of the stuff that we said came true. Some of it didn't come true at all, because we, again, had no idea what we were talking about. But it was all like about music and what was going to happen with the world of music, because we loved music. We always went to concerts together, still do. And, real good friends of mine, of all three of ours, our buddy Rob is on WCYY, which is a local radio station here in Southern Maine. And we just kind of became friends and did that. We didn't know we were going to obviously get shut down and be at home once we started, which kind of allowed us to do more of it, and probably why we kept going. And we started asking people to come on. And because they were stuck at home too, they started saying yes. And all of a sudden, you're 210 episodes in, you've interviewed 100 bands, and you're like, how did this continue to happen? But it's pretty cool. It's been a lot of fun.
I know you do a lot of the editing and some of the behind the scenes work. For those that want to start a podcast, and everyone, tons of people have podcasts. We just started one. What is the hardest thing about producing a podcast that no one knows until you're actually doing it and sitting there and this is the fun part, what we're doing right now, but there's so much more that goes into it, from the prep to the scheduling to making sure the guests can make it, making sure that the audio's good, the video's good. So what is that hardest part of producing it that no one knows about?
If you want it to be good, like anything, it takes time and effort. You could just roll the balls out, record, and slap it on the internet and call it a podcast, and that works for a lot of people. But it's just right now, it's just Anthony and I that are doing most of it. Nate joins us occasionally. Being on the West Coast is tough, and having a young one, all that stuff. So he joins us when he can. But if you want to edit it to make it sound good, if you want to, you employ friends to make music for you, so you have your own music. You got to find those. Got to source that stuff. Sourcing guests is difficult. When we first started asking people, not having a resume of people that have been on, so anybody to take you seriously is difficult. Once you start getting some people to say yes, it makes it a lot easier. And then you get on, PR firms. And I have a bunch of PR firms that email us pretty much daily. Some of it's not stuff that we can get, but at least we're on their radar, which is cool. And then you inquire when there's stuff that you want. But being able to learn how to edit, learn how to mess around with video, learn how to make visuals to promote your episodes, start all these social media, accounts so that people see it, like all that stuff to make it good. That's difficult. And not a lot of people realize putting all that work, it's a part-time job. I bet I spend 12 to 15 hours a week thinking about doing stuff for the podcast.
Yeah, so for Podio Slave, just a quick, so the podcast is called Podio Slave, very clever name, obviously.
Thanks.
Why do you think, in general, why is having a podcast about music, and specifically the genre of music you all talk about, why is that important to artists? Like, why, we see a lot of sports podcasts, entertainment, a lot of show business, but why is music, why is that important? If you're talking to an artist, say, hey, it'd be great for you to come on, not for a 3-minute hit on the local whatever station, but this is a 25, 40-minute interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's promotion for them, depending on the level of artist too. Like there have been times that we've tried to outkick our coverage a little bit and go for somebody big, and occasionally we get them. And it's like, well, they're doing us more good than we're doing them, but this is great. And then there are times when we discover something that we all really like collectively, and maybe they're not super huge as a band yet, but like, let's get them on the ground floor and get those guys on early and tell their story and promote their music. Even if it's to a small audience, you get it out there to people. So it's to try to give them value if they're promoting something, whether it be a new record or a new venture or a book. We've had photographers and authors on before too. We had an author on the spring of 2022. He wrote a book about a tour that happened in the year 2000. And then from that decided to resurrect the tour. And then we ended up covering the tour for the big show in late August that year. We ended up interviewing a bunch of people that had been on the original tour, people that were going on the new one. We provided this kind of value for all these people to promote this big show. And we get to go to the show and interview people backstage and be backstage and like the stuff that you kind of dream about doing when you start the thing. So you grind and you get there.
Yeah. I want to go back and just say I liked the points you made about what's the thing that people don't realize goes into a podcast. And I even for this, I wouldn't say I spend 12 to 15 hours, but I do sit down and sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm busy. Let me just bang this out really quick. But like I sit down, I'm like, okay, I got to edit this, and this. And I end up sitting there for 4 or 5 hours at a time. And that's just like that's just like the graphics and putting the basic stuff out there. So, but it's one of those things where I would assume it's the same for you since you're 200 episodes in, but you enjoy it so much, it doesn't really feel like work. It really just something that you can enjoy. So that's really cool. But let's talk about some of your more memorable guests. So give us maybe 3, 5, even if you have more than that, just throw as many out there. But some of the ones that either you enjoyed personally or some of maybe the bigger guests that you've had on the podcast.
So obviously the first one was really cool just because none of us thought we'd ever get one. We were just like getting ready to record an episode, and Nate, who lives in California, had like reached out to this was right as everything's shutting down and people are starting GoFundMe's to keep their businesses open and keep their employees, with food on the table. And Amoeba Music out in California is one of the biggest independent record stores in the world. And the owner was like, yeah, we'll come on. So he says yes. We ask him if he'll come on the night before to do a sound check because we don't know what the hell we're doing.
Oh, no.
We have no idea what we're doing. So he does. He comes on with us. We do a sound check and we're like, all right, cool. We'll see you tomorrow night. We never do that today. Like we know what we're doing, obviously, and that's fun. But to be able to have the first guy was awesome. Our second guest his name's Greg Bergdorf. He was a guitarist for the band Zebrahead, which was a pop punk band out of Southern California in the late 90s, early 2000s. They're still a band now, but he was with them then. We were huge fans. He said yes. He's been on with us 7 times. And
wow.
I met up with him in Savannah, Georgia 3 years ago and hung out with him for the weekend. Awesome dude. He's become a friend, which is really cool. He's a big Mets fan, so we talk baseball a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he's a great guitarist. Like, throw that into the mix. It's fun stuff. And then we all three of us were huge 311 fans in high school, the band 311. And we just hit up the bassist, and he said yes. We DM'd him on Twitter, summer of 21, and he said yes. And the next thing you know, we're talking to him for half an hour, 45 minutes, and his son starts playing the piano in the background, and he just plays the Tetris theme out of the blue. And I'm like, I'm keeping this all in there. And he's like, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was amazing. So
Those guys are freaks, right? They can just pick up and play anything. I'm so jealous when I look at some, whether it's Rockstar or Charlie Puth or some of these guys that just have perfect tone and they just be like, just start playing anything. That's crazy. So you've had 311, you've had someone from some 41. Who's your white whale? Like, who's the guy that let's just say that you could, and I can click my fingers and next week you have him on, and it doesn't have to be the biggest name, but who you think would be the most interesting conversation?
We'd love for, obviously, Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, Nirvana would be an amazing guest. Listened to every record they've ever put out, seen him in concert. He just seems like a fun guy to talk to. He's worked with John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. He's worked with Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age, two of my favorite bands ever. And then Foo Fighters is another one of my favorite bands ever. So he would just be a guy that I think we could talk to for 3 hours and not even... We wouldn't even scratch the surface because he's got stories for days. So he'd be the white whale right now.
I thought, I gotta be honest, I thought that I would go this whole, when we talked about, some of the people you had on, I thought I'd go the whole time not knowing anybody. And then you said Foo Fighters and I'm like, yes, I knew one. I knew one.
Zach, I'm old.
I would say that. I would just say, and I'll be honest, like that type of music is something my dad is really into and I hear it on the radio all the time. But myself, I've only scratched the surface. So like you said, Led Zeppelin, Foo Fighters, that's what I would call the surface. Yeah. And then everything else underneath, I just haven't really been able to get into. But that's
fair. There's a lot out there now too. There's music everywhere. And that's, again, it goes back to us kind of giving value to some of the smaller voices if we can. Like, any way we can promote people that maybe don't have a huge following. That's why we do it. That's part, if we like the music, and that's the big thing. Do we like the music? All right, cool. We're at square one. Let's figure out what we can do.
So as in today's age, especially with, you talked about how COVID changed a lot of podcasting and stuff like that. Nowadays, it does feel like everybody has a podcast, whether it's literally every celebrity you could name probably has a podcast. So how, even in your own situation, how have you gone about being unique? Because that's how you get your podcast out there. That's how you do something different. How have you been unique with Podio Slave? But also, how do you think in general? What's a good sort of, I guess, what's the word?
Advice.
Advice. Yeah. What's the good advice for someone who's looking to try to make it more unique, like what we're doing here? Because this is episode 4.
Right.
What do we? How do we get that uniqueness?
So I think the big thing is you talk about something you're passionate about, right? So you find the thing that you know a lot about, you have some lived experience with. Listening to you guys talk hockey last week, I was like, yep, they both like hockey. I can tell they both have some lived experience with this. It's something that they both are really into. And some of our best episodes have been when we found somebody who maybe it's 20 years since their kind of classic record. And not everybody remembers it, but there's a big group of people that remember that record and that time. And then we have that person on and we shoot the breeze for 2 hours about that record. And then it goes nuts because people are like, thank you for shedding some light on that. So it's because we lived it. We saw it 20 years ago, something maybe we grew up with. I was your age when I heard it, Zach, and now I'm, my age. And I get to, as is Jeff, we get to be 40 years old. And we're kind of reliving those glory days a little bit of the band that we saw in this tiny little hole in the wall that's now playing 8,000, 10,000 cap places. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that the long form interview, I think, is kind of changed the game. And whatever, again, it's music or sports or Hollywood, whatever. Because for me, like, I started getting into some of the Joe Rogan podcasts. No, I don't listen to every single one. I don't have that much time in the week to listen to them. Right. But I remember watching. I forget who the first one was. It was maybe he's a comedian who I thought I didn't really like their movies or their comedy. And then I watched him get interviewed for an hour and a half, and I was like, oh, I get him. I understand it now. And I think and that's obviously, last week we talked to Jack Webb for an hour, and like we could have talked for 3 or 4 hours, just talking passionate about something. The long form interviews, I think for us, it's great too as the podcast host, but for the content, the people we're talking about, for me, if I was a famous person, that's the way to get your personality out there. If you're a really good person, some people aren't, so they should stay off podcasts. That's really interesting for me. Like that would make me more interesting when instead of just hearing your song or seeing you in this TV show, to actually hear how you think, I think is fascinating too. And I'm just curious, like when you're talking to guests, how much, we talk about the pendulum here, our content of what we're talking about and our guest content. How do you kind of determine on a week-to-week basis, is the guest the star of that show, or is it really us with a guest?
Yeah, that's a good question. And to kind of answer both this one and the previous one that I don't know that I actually answered, being the uniqueness being like finding out the story behind the story, right? Like everybody's heard why this song got big, but like what headspace were you when you wrote it? Like we've heard stories that we had no idea that was the case when that happened. Like someone was like, I was ready to quit the band. I hated the band. Oh yeah, that set that you really loved watching on YouTube. Yeah, I was asleep 5 minutes before I went on stage, and then I went out and killed it. Like the stuff that you just don't know until they come on and talk to you for 45 minutes to an hour and give you this long form answer and show you their personality, right? And depending on the week, depending on what we're doing, if it's somebody that we're having back, sometimes we like to do a segment with that person because maybe they don't have anything to promote, but we enjoy talking to them. They enjoy talking with us. Okay, let's come up with great album openers. Give us 5 great album openers. We'll all go around in circle. We'll talk about the album opener. We'll give a little context behind the music, who, when it come out, how high it hit on the charts, et cetera, and then go from there. Or is so-and-so coming on to kind of give the story about a certain time or record or concert or any of that stuff. It really just depends on what we're looking to do that week.
Tony and I have a lot in common: sports, Thornton Academy, all this great stuff. One thing we don't have in common, at least our history, is concert going. I mean, I can count on the number on one hand how many concerts I've been to in my entire life, and that includes someone like James Taylor or Avett Brothers. Like nothing crazy. You're obviously been to a lot of concerts. That's one of your passions in life. So I just want to ask you, looking forward to the rest of 2024, what concerts are you looking forward to that you're going to? And in general, the main concert scene, whether it's in Bangor, whether it's in Portland, the State Theater still around, what do you think the scene is like here in Maine right now for bands, especially in your genre?
Well, we're coming up on the summer, right? The good weather. So we're going to see more stuff roll through Maine. Thompson's Point gets a lot of shows. That's booked by the State Theater. I'm going to a couple of shows there in July and August. I think the next show that I have, friends of ours who actually made our theme music, it started as a kind of a hip hop beat that a friend of mine that I used to work with 20 years ago made. And then I had the band Troll, who I knew I've known the lead singer for 20 years, had them kind of put their rock twist on it. And they are playing the Cavern in Portland, Maine, which is down underneath what used to be the stadium. I think it's Free Street Grill now, whatever's across from the Civic Center there.
Yeah.
And that's not even the Civic Center. I'm dating myself a million times right here. Seeing those guys, seeing Sparks the Rescue. They're a band. I think the lead singer is a TA boy. Right?
He is, yes.
Yeah, yep. Seeing them at Sun Tiki Studios in Portland, Maine, which is a tiny little hole in the wall. We know Toby. We've had Toby on a couple times, once anyway, the guitarist. And then a couple shows in the summer. Going down to Boston to see, I think, Blink on my birthday.
Oh, Blink!
Blink at Fenway.
Blink that's a show that last year that I would have gone to. I was in Florida when they were kind of up in this area. That was, Zach doesn't remember them, but that was like when I hear those songs, I think I'm sitting on my middle school bus, looking at my crush who's sitting with somebody else and just blasting, Blink 182. Those guys were. It's crazy they're still around.
I know of them. Whether or not that there's somebody that's on repeat in my playlist, maybe not, but I know of them.
Zach,
but it's interesting.
What do you listen to? Give me what you listen to. I want to know if it's anything that I've heard.
So here's the interesting thing. So obviously I'm a teenager, big rap, R&B. I'm into some of the older stuff. So like Nas.
Oh, dude, all day. Yep.
Yeah, it's okay. So and then and this is where I go crazy, and my dad is, I don't know if he's gonna watch this, but my dad I spite him for this. I listened to Margaritaville, Jimmy Buffett music for years, and so now I just I hear the sounds of island music, and it just makes me I like it. So
Cheeseburger in Paradise, big Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Yeah, huge. Yep, yeah. Last Mango in Paris. We get down in the rabbit hole. So literally, my dad and I will sit in the car and on a drive for wherever, sometimes he'll drive me down to South Station when he's taking me back to school, and we'll sit in the car and listen to Jimmy Buffett, and we'll sit for hours in silence and just listen. And it's that's what I've become. I'm rap and Jimmy Buffett, which is such a weird combo. So,
and that's kind of how I got into music myself. I was listening to Tom Petty with my dad in the car. So I feel you. And I love Tom Petty to this day. I saw him twice before he died, and he was an amazing show.
One of my favorite things to do too, now that, with YouTube and everything, I love going back to some of these 60s and 70s bands, and not even so much the music, but watching them perform. And I went down the rabbit hole of the Mamas and the Papas last night.
Yep.
And because of a famous scene where one of the singers, because they were forced to lip sync on the Ed Sullivan Show, ate a banana during half the performance just to kind of protest. But some of these, where there's the Doors with Jim Morrison, like some of these guys and girls, like, fascinating stuff. So that's something, and I would say for Zach, like, go look at some of Jimmy Buffett's stuff, because the video from the 70s and even 80s, it's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
What's also crazy is, as we wrap up here, it's been an enlightening interview, is we'll talk a little Patriots, because you got your Patriots hat on there.
I do. That was for you, Jeff. I put this on for you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
It was going to happen the whole time. Once he came on and the hat was on, I'm like, it's going to end up with Patriots talk.
So I've made my, Tony and I are in some group chats together, and I am notoriously the pessimistic one, have been for years, and Tony is the more optimistic one. You can never know when one of us are trolling the other, but
that's true.
Let's say this: we all agree now that the Patriots stink, right? We're all at that level now, even though the defense is elite, whatever. So let's just go the draft. If you are sitting there at number 3, let's say Caleb Williams goes number 1. Let's say Drake May goes 2. I know this stuff about JJ McCarthy's out there. Let's say Drake May goes 2. You're, this GM of the Patriots. What are you doing with that number 3 pick?
If May's off the board, you got to take Jaden Daniels, right? You have to.
No,
No,
I don't think
no,
that. No,
no,
no. And look, I haven't studied him as much. I think you take Marvin Harrison, and you take a flyer on a guy in the second round.
You take Jaden Daniels, and I'll give you this, and this is what I see. The Patriots, their Twitter or X. I keep doing that X.
Yeah,
they're X, but they're tweets. They're tweets on
tweets.
X. That's how I say it. I can still say tweets.
They do tweets from Pro Day, and I don't know why they do this, because if you're going to do a tweet on a Pro Day of one of the top 10 picks, you should do them on all of them, because if you're only going to do it on one guy, you're telling the world, like, I want this guy, basically.
You're showing your hand.
And they put out one on Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels. They're gonna take Daniels if he's there. It's gonna happen.
I'm actually shocked that Tony doesn't say JJ McCarthy. Tony's a big Michigan fan.
Okay, so
what the heck? What's your problem? Everybody says now he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, he during the year, everyone's like, I don't know, he's any good. But now that he had his pro day in shorts and a t-shirt with no defense, there we go. Go Big Blue. Now that you don't have a coach, he's off in L.A. We'll see how that goes. But
the defense was elite. He had a great running back and a great offensive line. I love what he did. They won a national championship for the first time that really counted in my life. I mean, they won. They shared it.
Split one,
with Nebraska. Which, I mean, if they played, Nebraska would have killed them. Let's be honest.
Yes, I agree.
But so I love JJ. He's not a early round. He's not a third pick in the draft guy. Like he needs a good situation. I think he could be good. I think he could be a very good pro. I like what he did in situations that were like late against Bama. That's a drive that not a lot of guys can do, especially against Alabama, right? I mean, so yeah, I'm with you. I do like him, but if you've got the third pick and Daniels is there, you gotta take him.
It's for me, he almost has Mac Jones syndrome, where it's not his fault, but he had a great team around him, and all of a sudden he's shooting up draft boards. I mean, Mac Jones, we all heard how close he was to going second or third overall to the 49ers. Imagine how bad that would have been. I mean, they ended up taking a quarterback who stunk as well. My final question for you, and then Zach can wrap it up, is Harbaugh. Harbaugh's gone from Michigan. Obviously, you guys promoted from within. What do you think he's going to do in the NFL? I think he's going to fall on his face. I just think his the way he coaches, he uses faith a lot, like, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but he seems like a king kind of guy, which works on a college campus. I'm skeptical that, because that team's going to stink. I mean, they got Herbert, but they had to cut a lot of guys. What do you think how do you think he's going to function in the NFL, not just on the field, but in the locker room?
I think how quickly we forget how good he was with the Niners early on. I mean, they almost won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, almost.
So and they had first and goal, right? And if they get in, they win it. In that Super Bowl where the power went out against the Ravens. So my
suspiciously, that was a Ravens inside job.
Yeah, you are so pessimistic.
Against the Ravens, 100%. I don't trust the Ravens for anything.
But the story, no matter if he does good or bad, the story's there. The Harbaugh brothers, they're there. They're in the league together. It's a big story. And don't sleep on the Chargers. They have a good pick. They could take a good wide receiver. Odunze from Washington is right around where their pick is.
Yep.
That's like they got a good team.
They'll be good in a couple of years, but no, they've lost all their wide receivers. I don't believe them. And
I think he'll have the short window like he did it in San Francisco, where they're good for it'll take him a year or two to get there, and then they'll be good for 3 or 4, and then they'll get sick of him, and that'll be the end of it. He'll be back at a college somewhere.
Most coaches are like that nowadays.
Stayed at Michigan and won 4 or 5 there, but whatever.
I know, yeah.
Before we get off, you know what, Jeff? I'm doing this. I need you to say one nice thing about the Patriots, and it cannot be about it can't be. Oh, the defense is so good.
I wouldn't say that anyway because I think they're overrated. But
okay, I need to say one nice thing.
Oh my gosh. Give me a second. I think that Christian Barmore has the potential to be an elite defensive tackle. He's the closest thing I've seen to Vince Wilfork. They've tried to, who's the guy they drafted like a couple years after Vince retired? Defensive tackle. I think he was from Texas. He was very similar to Vince Wilfork. Malcolm Brown. There we go. Malcolm Brown. Serviceable player, was not the Wilfork he went on. So I think Barmore could, this is for me is the year for Barmore. Like he had a great parts of last year, but if he wants to be an elite, not saying he's going to be Aaron Donald, but if he wants to be Vince Wilfork, he needs to be a dominant force pretty much every game this year. I have some faith that he could do it. I think between him and Judon and Christian Gonzalez, they definitely have 3 guys there that could be elite. I'm very skeptical on the rest of the team. I think they can be good. Guys like Duggar are good. I don't know if they're elite. But Barmore, there's your positive. I think he could be an absolute stud this year. You just got to stay healthy.
Doesn't that feel good to say something nice?
No, because they're going to win 3 games this year. So great. Congratulations.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our interview with Tony Giordano. I want to thank you again for joining us. It was a great conversation, learned a lot about athletic training, and we'll hopefully see you again sometime in another episode in the future.
Yeah, guys. It was a
go
blast.
Blue.
I'll do it again. Yes, go Blue.
We want to thank Tony Giordano again for coming in for that great interview. And now we are going to finish up episode 4 as we finish with the last 3 episodes as well. The same way, the take that has nothing to do with sports. Jeff, go first. Let me ask you, before we start, is there another airplane take? Are we
No, but I'm going to Europe in a few weeks, and I'm sure you'll hear some responses about hotels and traveling in Europe and how much better it is than the U.S., but not for a few weeks. My take this week has to do with weather. And I want to say the sneaky worst type of weather out there is wind. Wind is a bastard. Wind doesn't get nearly the amount of crap that all the other ones do. Why does wind suck? Tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, power outages, wind chill. Right there, the 5 of the worst things you could possibly have with weather or weather effects all have to do with wind. Without wind, there would be no tornadoes. There would not be hurricanes. There would not be blizzards. You would not get many power outages. And certainly, I forget the last one I said, but you wouldn't get all the wind chill. Like there's some days out here, especially in Maine and in the Northeast, where it's kind of sunny out, so it's not bad in February and March, but then you get that wind and it drops at 20 degrees. Wind is terrible. The only time wind is good is on a really hot day when you get a nice little breeze. If it's too much wind, it's not fun to play golf. You can't really play sports outside. It messes up with baseball and everything else. Wind is terrible. I don't know where wind comes from. I have absolutely no idea. I'm not a scientist anyway. But I can understand the basic principle of okay, here comes a storm with rain and snow or whatever, and thunder and lightning. I get the basic premise. I have no idea where wind comes from because you can't see it. It's just, and I don't know if it's where we work at Thornton Academy, it's incredibly windy all the time. It's just a weird, because we're near the coast and everything. Wind is terrible. I wish wind would just go away. My big take is it's underratedly bad. Scott Zolak on the Zolak and Bertrand show, 95 The Sports Hub, has the same take every time. He's like, when wind's involved, you just stay away. So sorry, wind, you're out.
Yeah, I like that take. I think there are definitely some other weather patterns that are horrible, but your 5 points right there is, I 100% agree.
It's all related to the wind, pretty much all of it.
100%, and I think that this, at least for me, the wind in Connecticut has been horrible, and especially in the spring and late winter, and it's really made me hate just hate it. The other day I was talking about what I was telling somebody, I want it to be 70 and I want it to be a tiny bit breezy, windy, and they were like, no wind, and I'm like, I don't mean the wind we've been having because that is horrible. I'm talking about that nice little breeze you get in the spring, summer. That's what I want. But no, wind's been horrible.
Here's my drop the mic comment. How many snow days did Thornton Academy have this year? 0. How many days do we have no school because wind knocked out power? 1. That's it.
Yep,
Facts.
that is big.
Wind sucks.
Big change in the weather patterns this year. I feel like wind's been a big factor. So my take this week, I think I'm staying with what I had last week or maybe a couple of weeks ago about TV and movies. So my take this week is that I absolutely despise, and I don't think this is a hot take. I think a lot of people can agree with this. I hate when TV show producers, directors, the people that make the decisions on how long the show goes, when they don't know when to quit. Sometimes you have to quit when you're ahead. There are so many amazing shows that would have benefited from cutting out the last 2-3 seasons, maybe even just one, but I'll give some examples I have. When you have to be able to say, let's just say I'll use my example right now. Jack Ryan. I don't know if you've watched Jack Ryan, but it's a 4-season show. And the first season, it was on Amazon Prime. And after the first season, it was the biggest show. It was huge. It was so successful. The story in season 1 was amazing. Seasons 2, 3, and 4 are pretty solid. They got good stories. Did you disagree?
Yeah. Okay. I don't disagree with your take. I think Jack Ryan's a terrible example because the first 2 seasons were great. The 3rd and 4th seasons, I was like, "What is this stupid show?" I didn't get through season 4 because it's wildly outlandish, and I'm like, this is one of those shows where I'm like, I don't want to live in this world. Like, I don't want to live in a world where Jack Ryan needs to exist. It's terrible.
So I can't believe I'm changing.
I agree with I know the list that you have here. I agree with some of them. I disagree with others, so I can't wait to talk about them.
So Jack Ryan, here's my thing. So I just finished up Jack Ryan, and that's why this is really on my mind because this show ended like a while ago.
Yeah.
The whole premise of the show is ridiculous. They would never send a CIA analyst out to the first season was Syria, I believe, or Yemen.
Yeah.
They would never send him to Yemen to go deal with these crazy terrorists that they're dealing with. So once you kind of get into that idea of, okay, Jack Ryan is just seen as this super cool hero figure, I think every season's great. I loved season 3. I don't know what you're talking about. Season 3 was incredible. But here's my thing. If Jack Ryan had gone on after season 4, and I think you maybe can agree with this, after season 4, any new idea they could have come up with would have been trash. They had expended the 4 or 5 good ideas, the plot twists. They had expended all of that, and they canceled it. They said, nope, we're done. We're not going to go 6 more seasons of stupid plot ideas that are just not going to be fun. And would I have probably watched them? Sure. I probably would have watched them and hated them, but I would have watched them. But my other examples of shows that should have been stopped a few seasons earlier, and some of these I do like, The Office.
I'll give thumbs up, thumbs down when you say them to let you know where I stand.
The Office should have canceled it after Steve Carell said, "I'm done after season 7."
100% gone.
Should have been done.
Yeah.
Stranger Things is a 2-season.
2 seasons, yes.
2 seasons at most.
Yes.
Everything else is dumb. I'm not even gonna watch season 5.
I'll watch it, but I'll hate watch it.
Grey's Anatomy, and this
never watched it.
Okay, so for those of you who know Grey's Anatomy, they're at 20 seasons now.
20 seasons for any show is crazy. The fact that
It's
Simpsons on season 30, I mean, come on.
They've had some great ideas, but the longer they get in the seasons, the crazier these because every episode's different. You know, they have like all the character relationships go throughout the season, but every episode of some new disease they're dealing with, and the longer they get in, the more ridiculous they sound. They could have compacted this into an amazing 10, 12 season show and finished it. But in season 20, you know the premise, right? Meredith Grey is the main character. More or less. Yeah. Meredith Grey's second half sister's cousin's husband is now in the hospital. Ooh, how is she going to deal with this new relationship? No, we're done at that point. That's I hate that. That's the worst. And my hot take, I don't know if you've seen Breaking Bad. Have you seen? You disagree?
Yes, I disagree completely.
The last, I don't think this show deserved as many seasons. Better Call Saul deserved all of the seasons it got. Better Call Saul is one of the greatest spin-offs of a show ever created. Better Call Saul is an incredible show.
It's all right.
Okay. But Breaking Bad could have been compacted more. I think the later they got, the longer these plots these plot and the way it changed, I didn't think really fit with the story and what they were going with in the first couple seasons, and I kind of lost interest. It's a hot take. I don't think anybody agrees with this on.
No,
with
nobody does.
this.
I will say this, like, it's tough because, like, when you look at it, were there some middle plots in the middle of Breaking Bad that they probably could have quashed? Yes, but the last 6 episodes or so of Breaking Bad are amazing. That last season is,
The ending was great, and I agree with you on that. It's the last like season and a half between the first couple seasons and then the ending that I just felt like they stretched out and compact that into a couple of episodes and make it shorter. I don't know.
No, I agree. I agree on your overall take, and some of the examples you had are great. Here's a couple shows that didn't do this, and this is why they're iconic. The Sopranos, which every season, every episode was amazing, and what was the other one I had? Seinfeld. That's the reason why Seinfeld's classic. They could have gone on. They could have made another 4 or 5 seasons of Seinfeld, and they probably would have been hilarious. But they stopped it before it got too stale. Jerry Seinfeld's offered something like $125 million, and that was back in the late 90s. So worth like $400 or $500 million now to do another season. He said no. But you look at not House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones. Their last season was awful. Now, but see, it's tough because like Game of Thrones, I don't think. The problem is they strayed to like the books ended. I don't know that much about Game of Thrones, but they're basically the books have been written by George R. R. Martin. He didn't finish them or finish the series, so they decided to do a last season, and the last season just happened to be horrible, like horribly produced and everything. So but that was different because that could have been a good season. Whereas The Office, after Steve Carell left, there is no reason for you to do that. That season 8, I think it was one of the worst seasons ever with Nellie Bertram. I mention her every time; she's the worst. They brought in those 2 like younger intern guys that were just like Dwight's lookalike and just awful. Andy as the manager is just stupid. Like when the whole plot line when he leaves for 3 months and no one seems to notice at corporate. He just leaves. That whole storyline was so stupid. So I don't even watch those seasons. Like if I'm flicking around, it's on Comedy Central or Freeform like every day. If it's anything beyond Steve Carell's season, I won't even consider watching it. So, but I think in general, yes, I agree. Again, it's all about the money. You know what I mean? Like they push it on. But now the problem is that they look at some of these shows on like Netflix, like Bloodline. Like Bloodline was a great first or second season. Now then it became kind of like not so great. Outer Banks, same thing. Like Outer Banks is stupid anyway. Like, but the first season we all watched it because it was during COVID, whatever. I don't know, another 4th season. Like, how are these people still alive? From what I saw in the first season, so you have to suspend reality, which is why it's just why movies are struggling because you have 2 hours or 3 hours to tell a story versus the other shows that can go on for longer and longer. But so I don't agree about Breaking Bad though. Breaking Bad's awesome. I wouldn't watch it again. I watched it twice through. That's it. It's a slow burn, but no, Breaking Bad was fine.
I left this one off the list because I wanted to surprise you with it because I know you're a big fan of this show. What is in this sort of take that I have here of should they have compacted it? Should they have ended it early? Do you think it's adequate for how long it was? Give me The Mandalorian because in my opinion, 2 seasons was enough. I didn't like the 3rd season. I think you could have restructured it as in maybe a longer season 1 or a longer season 2 and compacted it down a little bit because they could have gotten rid of a ton of that. And also another big point, some of their best scenes of him, the character Mandalorian, were in the book of Boba Fett. Which why would you do that? Because that season was horrible. So give me your thoughts on The Mandalorian and its structure.
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem too with The Mandalorian is, as I was trying to think about that, is I love Star Wars. Like, I'll watch anything Star Wars. I'm not too sold about this new show coming out about the Sith, but we'll see. The problem with The Mandalorian, like, The Mandalorian, you had Andor, you had Obi-Wan, you had the Book of Boba Fett, right? Those are all kind of interlocked, and I'm not so knowledgeable about Star Wars where I know like the time period. So I'm always asking my buddies, like, all right, when does this take place versus like Empire Strikes Back versus whatever. The problem with The Mandalorian was I found myself in the middle of almost every season, maybe even the first season. It was just such a basic, easy structure. It was beginning of the show, a problem happens. Mando, they need to find, the Mandalorian needs to find a way off this ship or off this planet, or he needs a ship part. And so he goes on a little adventure with the natives to destroy some occupying force. It doesn't look like it's going to work. All of a sudden, here comes Grogu. and then it fixes it. See, and then the episode's over, and then they move on to the next one. And there's like 4 or 5 episodes in the middle of each season that are just kind of almost like anthologies that are just like problem happens. Mando's like, I'm not doing this, and then he's like, okay, I'll do it because I need something from you, mutual. For that I would agree. But the problem is I still am so thirsty for Star Wars content. I'll still watch them, but I agree that I don't know if the season after season needs to happen, but I couldn't even tell you what happened at the end of the last season. I really couldn't. Like, I'd have to watch it again because I just don't remember. Because it's just so much.
It was boring too. To finish up this, I know you mentioned the Acolyte. I 100% agree. When they mentioned this, like, we're going to do a show on how the Sith started, I was thinking about all these old, I'm starting to get into like some of the nerdy stuff. The old
Kanan, Star Wars Kanan.
Yeah.
Canon.
The old Republic, New Republic.
Yeah.
Like, all right. But there's some really cool characters like Darth Nithilus and I know it's just but I was like, this is going to be like, and it's going to be an adult show. Like, it's going to be dark. It's going to be, there's going to be some cool action scenes. And I watched the trailer and I was like, come on. Like, what is this? Like,
it doesn't look like there's going to be much action. Like, it's not going to be a global show. Like, there's not going to be these battles in space going from planet. It sounds like it's just going to be very like nitty gritty.
Yeah. That is true.
But I'll watch it because it's Star Wars. I love Star Wars. So
yeah, I agree. I'm gonna watch it no matter what.
Yeah.
But
who's your quick? Just favorite Star Wars movie of all time, and including all of the
favorite Star Wars movie of all time. My favorite Star Wars movie is Rogue One.
Okay, same. It's amazing.
I understand how people are always like, oh, the best one's Empire Strikes Back. I didn't have any. They were good movies, 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, nothing crazy. Rogue One is the best in my opinion. It's such a good story, great ending.
That scene with Darth Vader in the entryway. I mean, I remember watching that in the theater, and literally my hair stood up. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. So good.
Crazy movie. Well, that's going to do it for episode number 4 of the Main Rundown Podcast. As always, make sure to follow us at Main Rundown Pod on X and Instagram. Be sure to look out for some of the best clips on those platforms. But we want to thank Tony Giordano again for joining us. Jeff, I want to thank you for joining me. And we will be back next week for some great topics. So we will see you all very soon.